Sometimes you're asked to find the domain of a function given the graph of the function. It's a little different. All we have to do is just look at the graph and get the answer. So for example 1, we're looking at this function. We can see that it's a function because it passes the vertical line test. So if I draw a vertical line anywhere, it intersects the graph only in one spot, which means that one input has exactly one output. And we know that that's the definition of a function. A function is a rule that assigns to each input exactly one output. All right, so let's see the domain for this function. We know that the domain is all valid inputs, right? So this is my x-axis right here, and this is my y-axis, right? So if I look at all the x values, if you imagine like this is 1 right here, and if I draw a vertical line through 1, I see that there is a value y in there, right? So for this value x, there is a valid y. For this value right too, there is also a valid y. For this value right here, there is a value y, right? For 6, there is a value y, and so forth. For 8, there is a value y. For 9, there is a value y. But if I go with 10, there is not a graph point for the value 10, right? So for each x, 0, 1, 2, all the way through 9, and from -1, -2, all the way through -9, I have corresponding graph for those values. So that means that the domain is -9 to 9, and I'm going to put brackets because I have the full circle in there. Okay, so the domain is all valid x's. Now to look at the range is the y values. So basically I have y values starting at -2, right? And then the y values increase until they reach, what is here, 7. Okay, so if I was to put this function in a box, the y values would go from -2 to 7, right? So the range is -2 to 7. How you get the domain and range from the graph of a function. Let's look at another example. So again, the x values are here and the y values are here. You notice that when x is 1, I have that the y value is 2, and when x is 2, the y value is 4, and this arrow means that it goes on and on all the way up to infinity. When x is 0, I have that y is 0. When x is -1, I have that y looks like it's -2. I do not have y's, I do not have outputs for anything less than -1, right? If it's -1.5, do you see there is not a function for -1.5? So therefore the domain it starts at -1 and it includes -1, and since the arrow indicates that it goes all the way, that means that I'm going to have values for 3, I'm going to have values for 4, I'm going to have values for 100 and so forth. So it goes all the way to infinity in parentheses. For the range now, remember, if you can think about putting your function in a box, it will start at -2 and it'll go all the way to infinity. If this was just a regular circle, then we would put parentheses -2 instead of bracket -2. Okay, what if you are not given the graph, but you don't know how to do it algebraically? So you'll have to actually graph the function and then from the graph give the domain and the range of a certain function. So in our case, the function we're looking at is f of x equals square root of x minus 8, and we're asked to give the domain and the range in interval notation. So we can use our graphing calculator to graph this function. So let's turn it on. It looks like I already had something in there. I'm going to clear it. So let's graph this specific function to get to square root of x plus 8. So I'm going to press second and then this to get to square root. To get x, I'm going to go here and then plus 8. And then I'm going to graph it. My window is not good, so let's change the window. So let's go -10 to 10. And then y-min, we can go -10, but we know that basically this function is only going to have positive outputs. So this is how our function looks like. So now let's give the domain. So the domain is all valid x's. So you notice that if x is right here, I have output right here. If x is like -6, there's function here. If x is -8, this right here is -8, then the function is 0. But if x is -9, there is no function corresponding to that input -9. So basically the domain, oops, is -8 to infinity, and we include -8, and then the range, let's look at the range. You notice how the y's start at 0. Let me just draw a quick graph in here. It's like that, and this is -8. So the y's start at 0 and then they go all the way up. So the range is 0 to infinity.